Good evening. My name is Teddy, and I have the pleasure of introducing you all to tonight's speaker. Meng-Hsiung Kiang is the co-founder and CEO of Chirp Microsystems. Her company designs, develops, and manufactures very low-power ultrasonic 3D sensing solutions for IoT devices. Michelle started with Chirp in 2013, and since then has brought her startup all the way from Skydeck to being acquired by TDK just February of last year. At TDK, Chirp is its entirely owned subsidiary and is looking towards a bright future of opportunity for further growth. In addition to working on Chirp at TDK, Michelle is also a general manager for another TDK business unit, InvenSense. The success of Chirp is a testimony to Michelle's experience. From her past work at startups such as Onyx Microsystems and large companies such as Micron, Michelle has gained great skill in strategic planning, corporate development, investments, new business development, marketing, and product management. Michelle studied electrical engineering at the National Taiwan University and then at UC Berkeley for her graduate degree. While at Cal, she was awarded the David Sakerson Award for her exceptional thesis work. She's one of our very own, and I couldn't be more excited than to have her here tonight with us. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Meng-Hsiung Kiang.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Okay. Hi, my name is Meng-Hsiung Kiang. Thank you so much for Teddy's very nice introduction. I'd like to get a write-up of that you just read. It's a nice bio I can use in the future. Well, again, it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to share our journey and stories about Chirp Microsystems, how we built a company from the university technology, that was initially created at the university labs, actually right here at UC Berkeley in Davis, and then all the way to commercialization, and then also company being acquired as a result. So I have the title as how we build this. Some of you may kind of recognize it, so similar to the more famous podcast, how I build this story. But I always feel like any startup is always a teamwork. So I really feel that it's more about how the team we build the company together. Although make no mistake, if Guy Raz called me up and want to do a segment on how I built this on NPR, I would definitely go with that title. So, okay, so in any case, so that's us. So first about me, although Vicky asked me to talk a little bit about myself, although I feel like Teddy has already talked a fair amount, but on the other hand, it's true that all of you don't know me, so maybe it doesn't make sense for me to spend a little time to talk about myself. So first, my title, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Chirp Microsystems, and then after, so I also have additional title after the company was acquired. So general manager, ultrasonic tracking range finding BU, under MEMS BG, SSBC, and then it's TDK Corp. So it's a little bit like an alphabet soup, but just because TDK is a big company. So lots of business structures. So they have business company, and underneath that business group, and then I am a general manager of one of business unit. So many people are not familiar with TDK. Except that maybe if you like music buff, perhaps they are known to make in the 60s and 70s, as a magnetic recording tape, transform the music industry. So of course that's way before when the time you were born. And more recently they make disc tracks, so which also is increasingly not being used these days. But that's why they are trying to look for opportunity to transform the company in the area that we, Chirp, has a product in, just happen to be the area that they're interested in. So it's the sensing technology, so they've been making a lot of acquisition in the space, and then so Chirp is one of their latest acquisitions, so that happened a year ago. So before that, then, as I mentioned, I was born and raised in Taiwan, so I got my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from National Taiwan University. And the reason why I got into a double E is just for a simple reason. So for us, or at least back in the days, we had to take an entrance exam in order for you to get into college. So, and basically, you had to choose which school you wanted and department you want to be in, and then afterwards, based on your score, they just, based on the ranking, they just say assign you to whatever department that you happen to be in. So in order to get into a National Taiwan University the double E department, you had to score on the top 0.1% of all the students. So if you get that score, it's not an option to not go there. So that's why I went. But on the other hand, it worked out. I really enjoyed my study there. And that's why I after graduation with my bachelor's degree, I decided that I want to go to grad school, and so I applied. And Stanford was kind of my backup. Just kidding. So when I got the acceptance letter early February, from UC Berkeley, I was like, California, here I come. So that was it. So I came here and got my degrees, and actually. I'm trying to say it. So when I was talking to my husband about giving this talk, he did suggest that I should tell people that when I first arrived in the United States, all I had was a suitcase and a dream. And then to which my daughter added, and a pocket full of cash that grandma gave you. So the truth is somewhere in between. I came with 2 full suitcases and some money, because again, I'm Chinese, so Chinese parents take care of their kids. They feel like that's their obligation. Despite the fact that I actually have full scholarship, and also a research assistant job with the professor already. And I didn't exactly have a dream, but I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to study all this, seemingly very interesting, super cool classes. And I wanted to do research because I did research in the undergrads I thought would be really interesting. And then after that, I'll find a job and work. So that's what I did, and I got my master's and PhDs a few years. And when I was about to graduate, so as you have heard, and then I listed there, I did receive the prize from WE department, which is sometimes people consider that as the best PhD thesis award. And in fact, it's really about a research award that has a lot of publications. So I did publish very extensively. It was very prolific. I think I have over 20 papers by the time I graduated, so which is unusual. So I seemed like on the path to be a researcher. So I was interested. I looked into a job at national research labs. I considered briefly about teaching, but since I was only interested in Cal and Stanford, and neither of them were hiring at that time, so that was kind of an easy decision of not applying. But that's also in the late 90s. It's also at the time when there was the dot-com boom, the first dot-com boom. So lots of things happening, a lot of startups. It's a very exciting time. Many technologies are being, lots of investment going into new technology, and was working on a very interesting technology, has a lot of commercial value at that time. So after interviewing at national labs and also like regular companies, at the end I just decided the lab job seemed kind of boring. So I took a job at the local company, and that being in Berkeley kind of tipped the scale in their favor. So I took the job, and then the same research I was doing, I was working on commercializing the technology I was working on at grad school at that company, and then very quickly, venture capitalists was knocking on my door because they thought that's a hot technology. It should be a startup, as opposed to me working at a small company. So I decided that's how I started my first company. That's prior to Chirp. And actually, so now I'm talking like in the reverse order. So that's Onyx Microsystems. I actually started the company with my graduate advisor, from Cal. And then, so initially started out as a technology co-founder. So I was VP of technology, really working on technology development. But then all my other co-founders were the grad students, the graduates from the same group. And then, so turns out the professor was the one who has the most business experience among us because he had a startup before that. So he helped us raise the first round of money, but he wasn't really going to be around like full-time forever. So we basically had to gradually figure out hiring senior management since we didn't really have a lot of work experience. And then also really need to start thinking about how to sell the product or technology that we think is relevant to customer. So since we're all technical founders, and it's a little bit like who should do that. And I think for me, because I was always interested in the apply aspect of technology. When I work on new research projects, I always want to know what is this useful, and I like to talk to people, and also I like to figure out what we are working on with is relevant. So I sort of naturally, perhaps, then move into on the business side because I started talking with a potential customer. I talked with the vendors, trying to get our technology made, and then so that's through that the first startup. That's where I moved from the technology side to business development and marketing. At the end of that that chapter or journey. And then ever since then, I've just been in on the business side of things. I have another startup. So Onyx was sold to one of our partners, and then I have another startup called Pink Solution. That's actually a company still around. So and so I was working on the marketing side and also came up with the initial ideas for the company. And so that company actually is still around, and was started in 2005. So still around. It's a software and hardware combined solution for supply chain management. It's an area I have completely no idea of. When I first got into it, just initially. We were talking with one of the first incubator in Berkeley that's called Siemens Technology to Business, TDB. So it's Siemens, for those of you, maybe most of you who don't know, it's a huge German company who makes a lot of heavy machineries or building technology related equipment and things like that. So they had the interest in doing something in the space that I was consulting for so after Onyx, I was consulting for another startup, and then by talking with investors and including Siemens, and we came up with the idea for Pink, and then wrote a patent, and then just started that company that way. So and so that company actually, as I said, it's founded in 2005, still around. So I was with the company for quite a few years, but I think it was 2011. I had the opportunity to join a company called NeoPhotonics. So at that time, they were just going IPO, looking for people to find a way to help them grow the company with the IPO money. So basically, to lead merger acquisition and investment activities, which is something that I have kind of dabble in through my other experience, but not really as a full-time role. So I thought that opportunities was interesting, so I kind of jumped right into it. So I was there for 2.5, almost 3 years, and did a couple of deals, acquired a couple of companies for NeoPhotonics, and both of which were very successful. And just in terms of having the new business become the fuel for the company's future growth. So I thought it was very interesting, and also I feel that what's most useful for me is what I learned through the experience is basically being on the other side of a table as an entrepreneur, because now you are on the other side looking at these entrepreneurs or new technology company and trying to assess if they are legit, are they real, and whether their technology really have legs. And then also just knowing that when you're doing deals, what in terms of the buyer or investors, what we're looking for, what kind of question we want answer, and things like that. So I learned a lot through that experience, and which also, as it turns out, was very useful as when Chirp was acquired. Because as I
Michelle,
I was back
I don't
to
know if
the
you're
other
going to
side.
talk about this, but I'm not so technical. Not everybody in the class is technical. Can you talk a little bit about one of those things and just how the idea, a little bit more about how you actually came up with the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I will talk more about Chirp. So let me get to it. I realized I did spend a lot. So just a little bit about Chirp. So the Chirp was founded, as I mentioned, it was from technology that was developed by UC Berkeley and Davis. So those are leading technology, in technology expert in ultrasound to pioneer the commercializing this really ultra low power sonic. Basically a sonar technology that's built on a silicon chip. So the vision that we have initially is that we're going to revolutionize how user will interact with devices, and then bring sort of new user experience to all kinds of consumer IoT devices, such as gaming, VR, AR, smart home devices, smart speaker, and things like that. So that's kind of the initial vision. And the reason why we pick ultrasound as the technology do was because ultrasound is actually already a technology that's very commonly used in nature by animals such as bats. So bats use ultrasound to chirp, the ultrasound chirp to navigate, so they can identify small insects that meters away, very far away from them. And whether it's in darkness, it's mostly in darkness, and from their wing, from just batting their wings to create that ultrasound signals. So we know that ultrasound is a great technique for range finding, meaning detecting objects from distance away, with high accuracy. And in fact, ultrasound has been used in many of the different consumer devices today. Not small consumer, but everyday devices today, especially most widely in automotive. Those backups. So when you back up the car, if you're driving, the thing that beeps when you're about to hit something, even though you can't see it, that's based on ultrasound. So those like a circle thing on your car bumper, those are ultrasound devices. So those are huge, big ultrasound modules. I don't have a clicker on the lower left-hand side. Those are the conventional ultrasound technology, and as well as so now for those of you who are interested in drones, ultrasound is also used in drone for navigation, object detection, hover stabilization, things like that. So as I said, ultrasound is already widely used in a lot of different applications. But those the devices are built with conventional manufacturing technology. So they are very large. They consume a lot of power and also quite expensive. But they are the best range finding solution, best to measure, detect things in the distance. So then our idea is that we want to build the exact same thing, but with a different manufacturing technology. So this is called MEMS. That is a technology that's derived of semiconductors, so how people build integrated circuits. So use that technology to fabricate these sensors with a much smaller scale. So we talked about the sensor, the volume will be 1,000 times smaller than conventional technology, 100 times lower in power consumption, and maybe 10 times or more lower than in cost compared to conventional technology. So with that, then we believe that with that dramatic miniaturization of the ultrasound technology, these devices can go into all kinds of consumer devices that you're using today. So I like the picture. So no, really, it's sky's the limit, right? There's all kinds of things we can do. So, and in fact, we did have, this is in a grad school, this is actually one of our co-founders also did this, kind of basically did use the ultrasound array, small array, and then show that you can detect, do 3D sensing, detect head and 2 hands with the ultrasound device. So.
Can you go over that a little bit again? Because I think it's so interesting. Like when Oculus was coming out, the whole visual, you all were working on things that had to do with sonar. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands what this is showing. I may be the most obtuse one here, but can you go over that one more time? So
Sure.
I remember seeing that gentleman also up at Skydeck, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So the picture you can see here, let's see if I can. So this one, these are ultrasound transducers. So I was showing you like this large, kind of circular, nickel-sized circular devices. These are built with the semiconductor technology, and the size of each is like 1 millimeter in diameter. So much smaller. So you can make these, an array of those on a chip.
So is someone wearing that?
No, actually, no. He's facing that device.
So he's facing that, and as he's moving his right hand or left hand, it can tell that the right hand or left hand is moving.
They're moving around. That's right.
So has everybody? What's that Tom Cruise movie where they have the
Minority
screens?
Report.
Yes, Minority. Have you all seen Minority Report? All right.
That's
Well,
too
it's just really, or any Star Trek movies. Okay, so on those you have these screens, and people are like moving the screens with their hands, right? And so this is something that you can do with your technology, right?
Yes, it is definitely one of the possible applications, and that's in fact how we thought that that's where the technology is going to go first. So we had that results, and then also actually the university, they had some funding, so they actually made a movie, just as we were kicking off Chirp.
We are very excited by the gesture recognizer. It combines technology developed at UC Berkeley in the Sensor and Actuator Center and at the Swarm Laboratory. By focusing on the power and size constraints of mobile devices, we've created a new and natural way for interacting with electronics.
For a long time, people have used light to detect objects, like the way a camera works. But using light and cameras to detect objects in 3D requires a lot of power and computation. Now, inspired by our medical ultrasound, we've made micro-machined ultrasonic transducers that operate in air. The best part is the sensor is really small and really low power. Whereas a camera takes 1 watt to record video, our sensor takes 400 microwatts to do 3D range finding. That's low enough power to run the system for 30 hours on a battery this small. It's so small, you might not even be able to see it.
We've built a prototype unit that demonstrates this technology. This is the ultrasound chip, and this is the custom chip that sends and receives electrical signals from the ultrasound chip.
We use an array of tiny ultrasound transducers to send a pulse of sound waves into the environment. We drive the sensor and it moves up and down, pushing the air back and forth and creating sound waves. The sound waves travel out through the chip and away from the transducers. Those waves bounce off objects in the environment, and the echoes return to the transducer array, which measures the time it took for the echoes to return. From the time of flight, we find the location of the objects relative to the sensor. This allows us to enable new user interfaces, like flipping through a photo gallery without even touching the screen.
This is the type of technology we expect to move beyond the borders of the university and into numerous applications that will leverage the small size and low power dissipation of this technology.
We believe that by improving the way we interact with our devices and the way we interact with each other, we can make a better, smarter, more connected world.
as I mentioned, right, we launched a company at that point. Let me just tell you a little bit more about the history. So as I mentioned, the company, the technology was initially kind of invented and incubated at the university for about 5 years, through funding from Department of Defense as well as some funding from the industry. And then so in late 2013, that's when we feel that the technology seemed to be mature enough. Students were graduating, and so we thought it's time to start a company. So we officially spun off Chirp Microsystems at the end of 2013. Started with some grant money from National Science Foundation, $150,000, pretty modest phase 1, but we did subsequently got an additional grant that totaling over $1.5 million. Got another grant from California Energy Commission, and then as well as another $1 million from a major, really big consumer electronic company to fund
Michelle, we
development.
heard from people who are like angel investors, or when somebody gives you a grant or you get money that way, does anybody own any of the company, or is it still all yours?
Yeah, so fortunately, with all that three, we did not give up any of the equity. So that's the nature of the National Science Foundation SBIR grants. They did not want, they did not take, they don't take anything, and CEC also is the same thing. The third one, though, it was not initially the plan for the company. They definitely did want to get equity from us, and it was a pretty substantial amount of money, or IP ownership actually was the main thing that they want, and something that we absolutely did not want to give up. So the grant was for, the contract was for a 10-month loan project, and it took me about that long to negotiate the contract. They started out wanting to own everything, and I started out saying that absolutely not, we're a startup. If we just give you everything, we don't have a company. So then at the end, after 10 months of negotiation, they were here and we signed a contract. So, so that was very important actually to help us through the initial funding stage, or funding the technology development without having to raise venture capital. Although after that we did have to raise additional money from the angel investors as well as venture capitalists for the amounts of roughly about the same amount, the non-equity base, the 3.6 and plus another, so double that amount from VC. Those are equity based. We did have to sell some stock based on that. But with those money, then we were able to transfer our technology from the university lab to commercial fabs, and then start making or getting ready to ramp to mass production. So that was at that point, late 2017. We were just about to get ready to close our Series A financing. It's a very successful raise because we made a lot of progress, had a lot of traction. So a lot of VC were ready to, it's what's called the oversubscribed round. We were planning to raise 8 to 10 million, but at the end, we were looking at raising maybe 14, 15 at that time because there was so much interest in the company. But then at that time, TDK came along and made us an offer that we can't refuse. So we, at the end, decided, after much deliberation, we agreed to be acquired by TDK, and then therefore, it's almost exactly a year ago, we became a subsidiary of TDK at that time. So, so as I mentioned, or as you have seen in the video, right, that we had started out with the idea of gesture recognition used as a user interface for many different consumer devices, and this is actually one of the early slides. So 2014, I was using this to talk about the potential of starting with the Xbox. That's the gesture recognition technology, and so we're expecting the technology cost is going to come down, and then it's going to proliferate into like all everyday devices. So that's kind of our pitch, or our prediction at that time. We were in the middle of 2013, thinking that we're riding that wave, going up. Although what we didn't realize was that in the same time, the analysts, market analysts, this is a Gartner, one of the famous. If you're in tech, one day you'll start seeing this. They talk about the hype cycle. They're talking about emerging technology, how oftentimes it started out with some hypes, technology showing promise, so it becomes this this period of gradually building up expectation, and then until at some point it gets to peak excitement, and then after that is the dissolution. It's the trope dissolution, and then some technology after it went through this hype cycle, the initial peak and valley, they do eventually get to this next phase of the growth, which is when the technology actually get adopted. So gesture recognition technology at that time, 2013, 2014, was actually at sort of in the peak of, or in the trove of disillusionment when we were going out trying to raise money based on that idea. So of course that didn't bite very much, but nevertheless, we got the funding from government grant and also customers, which is important because that is a validation of what we're doing is actually important, right? Thinking about a company will give you $1 million, and at the end did not end up with any equity or IP, but just prototype of the devices that we built for them, means that there's real potential after the for this technology. So,
Michelle, for the chart on the right, was that something you all had access to at the time, or now you all? Just curious.
This was probably on the internet that I wasn't paying attention to initially. Yeah. So this company does publish those sort of predictions every year. So yes, although at that time it's still a mix, right? There's still lots of companies that was funded during the 2010, 2011, the excitement period. They are coming out in 2013 with new product technology, and that's showing the picture there, most based on camera and whatnot, and showing the excitement. So there is still companies are getting money, maybe Series B at that time, when they got Series A early on, because their Series A investor at that point is kind of committed to that vision. They just have to sometimes people throw good money after bad. They're just I'm convinced I'm going to put more money in there.
Where you sit now in 2019?
Yeah, so actually that's a good question. So where are we in 2019? I feel that it is actually gesture recognition in that particular technology, which is actually not what Chirp is focused on today, is sort of still in the 2013 point in that chart, in that there's still lots of people coming to us asking about different, if our technology can be used for gesture recognition, whether it's big phone company, wearable, car company, you name it. People are still constantly thinking that is a potential revolutionary technology to really kind of change how people consume interact with devices. But I think right now the issue is just there's still not a particular killer app that people have really found, or any company that's really committed to develop that technology, and that's why it's still kind of there. There's still lots of interest, but it's not taking off yet. But in any case, so that's where we first started. But we didn't, the important thing though, the important lesson I want you to take away is that we didn't stick with it, right? So, but we did get enough funding to help us to develop our initial product. So this is a product, as promised, very tiny, it's on the fingertip, and it has all these great features that customer wants. So with that, the first sample that came out maybe 2-3 years ago, then we did a bunch of stuff. So I am hoping that I'm playing a bunch of videos about what you can do with a Chirp device. So he's writing Chirp in front of that sensor with our technology. So that's one of the demo that we made in 2015. And then next, I'm hoping, is it advancing? There. So the 2016, we did another gesture recognition demo. So this time we put 4 of that devices on the 4 corners, and then with that, we show you can use that to interact with your device without touching it. You can do swiping, rotational gesture, then it's changing you're picking songs with rotational stick. gestures and things like that. So that's So that's what we did. And then another thing that we did next, oh, come on. All right. And then we built another demo in 2017, sound gesture recognition. So this time we put in the wearables. So you can see that they're using ultrasound to track the movement of fingers so that you can use that as an input device. So instead of, you have to be touching or with your fingers right on top of your wearables, such that you're obscuring a screen, you can actually interact with the device with your hands or rolling next to it. So seems like totally cool technology. When we show these demo video to customers, everybody's interested in wanting to know more, but as I said, just so far, we haven't had an opportunity or a customer who's committed to bring that technology to market yet, but maybe one day. But instead, so what we did was that we continue, so through the process, and all that demo we did was, none of those was from us sitting in the lab and then just thinking what would be cool and let's build it, but it's always by talking to a customer. And then in fact, the wearable demo that we did was another major consumer electronic company paid us about $500,000 to build that prototype. So it's always about talking to a customer, understanding what they're trying to do, and then try to use our technology to solve their problem. So it's through that process we finally found our commercial opportunity, which is for virtual reality. There is this, so for, I don't know how many of you are gamers. I definitely was not one. So when the customer first came to us to talk about VR, I was like, what? Very what? And so they talk about issues. So these are the commercial systems, the Oculus, HTC Vive, Sony PlayStation. So they all have these devices. So it works, right? It's you have this goggle, and then you can play game with the controllers. But the way that they can track the position of a controller is with these technology that I'm showing there. So very expensive, IR camera or scanning lasers and whatnot that you have to set it up in your room so that you can play the game. So these are all the problems. These works really well for these high-end devices, but they have some problems. It's not mobile. You have to set it up in the room so that you can play, and consume a lot of power, expensive, and so all that problem. So that's where the technology was at that time, right? So we have a lot of these high-performing system that's out there with the technology that's very costly, very power-hungry, and very large. So what everybody wants is that they want to go to the right. So meaning they want to keep the same performance, but they want to bring down the cost and power consumption of these solutions. So then what happened, of course, because there's real need, so then you see that all kinds of people trying all kinds of devices, but then they all end up not being quite able to make it to that upper right quadrant. So through our discussion with the customers, right, I think we mutually convinced each other that Chirp's technology has the potential to be the one that would disrupt the whole market and then really bring the same tracking performance to the market, but with much reduced cost and power consumption. So that's what we decided to do 2 years ago, again, based on customer feedback. So we developed this system that has Chirp, a whole bunch of Chirp sensors embedded both on the head-mounted display as well as the controller, such that they're talking to one another through sound, ultrasound, and then to track the position with high accuracy that way. So you can see that because you're tracking just between your head and hand, so you don't have to set anything up in the room. So it's totally mobile. It's very low power, much lower cost. So we think that we got a winner there, and we did have a design win. So last October, this is our first customer announcement made by one of the leading brands in virtual reality system, that's an HTC. They announced their their controller, the developer's kit, based on our technology. So this is actually the slide that they use in their announcement with one of our engineers being the model there. So we're super excited. So this is the technology of the first product that is going to take our product into the market first. And then, but beyond that, we are engaged with many different consumer electronic companies, working on all kinds of different interesting and cool projects. Again, people oftentimes ask me, we don't know, we don't hear about you. You don't your website has very little information. You don't do any advertisements and all that stuff. How do you find customers? But actually, as we found, customers oftentimes found us, and it's in part because some of us, including myself, had work experience before Chirp. So we had connection in the industry. We were part of Skydeck, that helped. The technology came out of university, that helped. So there's a lot of, we're not selling to the consumer, we're selling to it's a B2B company, we're selling to businesses. So those big companies, our customer, do know us. We engage with them. They come to us and talk about the different ideas that they want us to work on, and so that's what we're doing. So super exciting. We feel that after the first product launch, we are right on the cusp of this big growth. So then. This comes to a question. So people ask me, often after acquisition, right? Do you think that you sold the company too early? And given that we are just about to it seems that going big time, it's going to be in every single device on Earth, right? So it'll be billions of those devices have our product. So did we sell the company too early? And then so my answer is. If I believe our business plan can be executed without any deviation, that we would bring the product to market, a customer would not have any delay, everything happened exactly as I planned, yes, I sold too early. But as you know, with all plans or projection, it's just something always happens. It's just a blueprint of what you want to do, but oftentimes things doesn't happen that way. Selling to TDK at that time was a good choice. We thought, because first of all, we didn't raise too much money, so we didn't give up a lot of the company. The founder and also employees still have pretty large amount of ownership prior to us raising the next round. So with TDK's offer, I feel that everybody, all the employees, and also our early investors would have a good outcome from that. We are not all billionaire, but it's a good outcome. And also, it will allow us to really focus on developing our product, and really executing on our vision, as opposed to me always worry about, we're running out of money, how do I come up with a story of the day when the investor likes to pitch that. So we made a decision at that time, and right now we still believe it's a good decision. With the big companies backing, it will allow us to really scale the business in a way that's faster than raising venture capital money and building everything from the ground up. Especially for us, being a hardware company, it requires a lot of infrastructure. People in manufacturing, logistics, customer support, and things like that to fulfill sort of our vision, right? To really bring our product to the market. So instead of basically raising VC money, selling a lot of stock to reinvent the wheels, shall we say, we are now part of a company that already have the infrastructure to help us to bring the product and technology to market faster. So we think we make a good decision. We're happy with the results so far. And And yeah, so kind of looking back of our own experience, I sort of talked a little bit about that. So this is a chart that was 2014 published by the European Commissioner about looking at startups. So they kind of identified the true value of death for early stage startups, so meaning the gap in funding. So at that time, there was oftentimes like early stage few investors are willing to put money in there. So that's kind of first value of death. It's hard to find money for early stage company. And then even after you raise some money, there was another one. So, but for us, so what happened was that we did start with the government funding to help us get started. And then us being in Skydeck help us to have free office, free food, which is quite important. And at that time, there was no funding for the cohort, but today, Skydeck actually also provide funding, which is very helpful. I think it's great development. But so with that, so this is the situation that we were in, and then in fact, so now in early stage, I think a company, it's quite a bit easier today to get money to fund your kind of early ideas, even though it may be counterintuitive. But there seems like good appetite for investors to invest in early stage companies, and also various angels and other sources to do that. So it's not so hard now for you to raise the seed funding, but the second value of death, is there. So it's like after you raise the seed money, but then you really need to, in order to get to the next growth phase, to have venture capital to put money in you, you really need to get to your company to a proof point where there is a sort of validated business model, and also kind of product market fit that you can demonstrate to the investor in order to get that funding. So that's where the Series A money will come in, and that's kind of really the valley of death still exists today. So a lot of companies doesn't make it through that for various reasons. So that is, so one thing, I mean, I don't know if it's my advice, but just when you are in the early stage, after you are able to get some initial funding, what's very important is that you need to use whatever amount of money you have at hand and figure out the business plan that is convincing, right? So maybe I'm stating obvious, but that is, that's really the challenge. I think that in the early stage these days, probably lots of incubators out there. You'll probably be able to, as long as you have a decent ideas, you can probably get your first idea first founded. But the challenge is that after you get the first funding, how do you get to the next phase? So I guess I'm going to conclude with a few things I've learned. So first of all, talking about customers, extremely important, especially if you are trying to build a product-based company. You really want to have a market or customer-driven products or process to design your product, as opposed to going the other way around, starting with the technology and trying to find, if there's a problem to be solved. So technology looking for a problem, not advice. If we can identify a problem first and find a technology to meet it, that's great. At Chirp, we were in between. We had the technology, we had some various idea about what can be done, but it's through talking to customer a lot, we gradually figure out what's the right product to build. And the second thing is having a vision. So that kind of is related to the first one. As I mentioned, all the things we didn't come from sitting in a lab, brainstorming and just come up with a vision. It's by talking to customers and help with their input to help shape your vision. And once you have an idea, you do have to be persistent, because oftentimes, if you're trying to bring new technology to market, new, very disruptive concepts, it's hard for people to get their minds around it sometimes, or if you're trying to displace an existing technology like what we're doing at Chirp. So oftentimes you'll find out naysayers, people come up with all kinds of ways to tell you what you're thinking is wrong. So So with that, you just need to be persistent, and which is, I find, is one of the key quality of a successful entrepreneur is the tenacity, being persistent with your vision. But on the other hand, have to be flexible in that once you've gotten enough input that you realize your initial vision is not in the right direction, you should pivot fast. You should give up, give out your initial thoughts, and then if you find a new direction, you should just go after that. So that while you still have a chance, right? Don't wait until too late. And the third thing is about the team, which is very, very important for all startup companies. If you just think about these are the people you're going to be working with for years to come, right? Unless you have a startup somehow you think that you can flip in a year. Otherwise, our team has been working with us, initial team, 5 years. So in a very high pressure, close-knit environment, so you really need to find people who have the same commitment to the vision or the ideas of the company, and also being willing to make that personal sacrifice often has required when you're working at a startup. And also it's important that you get along, right? Because otherwise it will not be a pleasure, pleasant to go to work. So that's with all the pressure you have in a startup, that's important. And investors, that's also important. So people sometimes think the analogy of finding the investors or accepting money from new investors is a little bit like a marriage proposal you're accepting. So the term sheet is a little bit like a marriage proposal from the investors. Again, these are the people you're going to be working with for years to come, hopefully. And they will have a lot of influence and hopefully help for you as well to build your company. So you really want to make sure that these investors share the same ideas, philosophy, vision, what have you, that you can really get along with them. And just having a big, big pocket and can write large check is not necessarily the best investor for anybody. I mean, at least I found for myself. Then the last thing is about money. So I remember in my first job, my boss liked to talk about how he feels that we need to control budget tightly like a drone, because that's how you make the company successful. And then so initially, I was always thinking, wow, that's crazy. But once you have your own startup, you realize when you spend money, you realize that money is basically you're spending your company, right? You sell a company share to get that money from the investors. So those are not free money. So you want to always be conscientious about how you spend money, not to say that you should be penny pinching, but just you want to make sure that you spend your money wisely. And also always thinking about the run rate. That's what people talk about. So how much money you have in the bank, and what do you need this money to take you to the stage where you can successfully get money from the next set of investors or the same investor. So you should always be thinking about it, and then always working back. If I have 1 year run rate, I would assume that it would take me 6 months to raise money, and therefore, but maybe market condition, etc. I probably add another 3 months buffer. So really, I should start raising money kind of 3 months from now. So in a way, it's constantly it is something that's constantly in your mind as a startup founder to worry about money. And then so the other way to help is to be creative, finding different sources of money, such as government funding, grants, and NRE with customer and things like that. So that's like a few things. And then the last thing I just want to leave you with is something I think that helped me. So I hope that it will help you as well. Is that I try to remember why things went wrong, but don't forget or try to forget about how it went badly, because you want to learn the lessons from things that went badly, but you don't want to remember all the horrible experience that you had to go through, either being failures or just things that's unpleasant. So you have to learn your lesson, forget about all the bad stuff, remember only the happy moments, and then move on. And that's kind of my advice for you. So that's our story. So,
Michelle,
thank you.
Thank you so much, not just for sharing what you've learned, but all the details that you've gone through. We've had a lot of different speakers talk in a lot of different formats, but I can safely say that you have provided so many details and tangible information. I can totally get why TDK bought you all and why you had your investors. So we'll have about 10 minutes, maybe maybe more like 5 minutes of Q&A, but I also think you brought something,
Yes.
right?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. I did bring, as I mentioned, our first customers products. This is virtual reality gaming devices that for those of you who's into gaming can come up and play a game with. So this is a controller that's enabled by Chirp technology. So
We'll take maybe 3 questions, and then whoever wants to go up and try the technology would be fantastic. So I'll open it up for questions, you all. Or does everybody? Yeah, go ahead. And if you don't mind, just state your name, what you're focused on, whether that's your major or not.
Yeah, hello. I'm basically a computer science sophomore. I've been doing computer vision since like few months. So I was really wondering. I mean, there's a lot of scope for computer vision in case of pattern recognition and especially hand recognition. I mean, why didn't you go to that field? Why didn't you explore going into computer vision in kind of gesture recognition?
I'm sorry, I think I missed the last part of your question.
Yeah. Why didn't you expand your views on? I mean, why didn't you go into the computer vision for pattern recognition and gesture recognition? Why did you stick to ultrasonic in the long term?
Okay. Yes. So it's a good question. So actually, I think that what I should clarify is that I am not claiming that ultrasound or our technology is going to just display all other alternative technology. Even though you look at the chart that was showing, like once you have that technology on the upper right quadrant, why don't you just stay with it? But remember, technology is a living thing, right? So technology doesn't stay in one place. So we do expect like all these other bubbles that I was showing on the other area, they will find a way to move towards that upper right quadrant. That's one thing, and that's why we need to continue to innovate, right? To continue to kind of expand the chart so that we're always stay ahead of the competition. But also, oftentimes, it is again, internal technology is not necessarily black and white, like all or none, right? So oftentimes there are different technology that's more suitable in different cases, or in a lot of time also they may coexist. So in fact, right now we are working on our next generation system for VR that may incorporate ultrasound as well as computer vision to basically take advantage of both technology and then rebuild like the best solution. So I didn't mean that computer vision is dead. No, it's definitely a technology that's widely researched, lots of different applications that people are counting on using it. So it's a good field. So stay with it.
I've been working with VR for the past 2 years. So I just wanted to ask, considering that the market for controllers, VR controllers that use inside-out tracking is, pretty big right now. Microsoft is, in it with their own solution. How did you decide that, that VR controllers is something that you're going to, go into, considering that there's a lot of competition already? And what did you think that, what are the problems that you saw in the industry that you wanted to fix?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. So as I was hoping that I've covered in my talk, but let me just maybe talk about it again. So it really, as I said, when we first got into it, I didn't know anything about VR. I mean, I heard about it, but I'm not a gamer. I wasn't particularly interested in it. So it's really through customer discussion. So we were talking with all the major customer in not only VR, just consumer electronic, mobile in general, and all this company has some effort in that space. So it's through this discussion, talking about the capability of our technology, and then gradually at some point, I think at one point it's one of those gesture tracking demo, and then I kind of mentioned that, hey, actually you can also kind of put our device like on a ring, for example, and then I can move. You have the ultrasound that's mounted on your computer, you move the ring around, and that's almost like I can like write things. I can take notes with my finger, without stylus. So it's that kind of sort of idea that we were bouncing around with customer, and then at some point one customer say, hey, actually our VR team has this problem, and we think that maybe your technology can help. So then we talked, and I said, yeah, I think maybe, probably we can. So let me do some research, and we'll get back to it. And then so went back with talked to the engineering team, and then we came up with a prototype, and it's not the rest of history. And then it was many months of hard work after that, working with the customer very closely, and then finally, we proven that we do have a technology that's a winning technology. Yeah.
Michelle, we've got one more question down here.
Sure.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for coming today. So I noticed that the university research was initially funded by DARPA. So I'm just wondering what the initial connection was there and the envisioned application, and if /and you envision your product being used in defense in the future.
Sure, yeah. So very good question. So the initial idea that DARPA funded was for soldier tracking. So to say totally not weapon related, because I would not be interested in that kind of stuff. But it's about sort of tracking, keeping track of where the soldier is. So the idea is that they have soldiers wearing inertial sensors, so those small devices that you have on your phones or wearable to help you navigate around. So they have that, but those sensors alone is not enough. So they need another technology to complement that. It's called dead reckoning. So basically, it's a way to help you to really identify exactly where you are. So in map navigation, it's a GPS signal to help with the inertial sensor combined to do dead reckoning. But for soldiers, sometimes they are in underground trenches and whatnot. They don't get GPS signal all the time. So then the idea, so basically, it's a professor who came out with the idea. Maybe we can use ultrasound. So that's the initial funding was for soldier navigation. So what's interesting is that although it's not obvious, at the end, the VR solution was exactly that, right? So it is with the controller having the inertial sensor, as I mentioned, but needing this complementary, this other technology, be it computer vision or ultrasound to help with dead reckoning. So we kind of went a full circle, from soldier tracking, gesture recognition, and at the end, VR gaming, but it's based on the initial technology that we had set out developing.
Thank you for including us in going that full circle. And I want to thank you again. And then if you're okay, people will kind of try the technology out.
Absolutely.
Approach you. And I'll put up